Hi, everybody. Great to have you back with us for another pregame edition of Game Notes with my partner, Scott Shanle. I'm Victor Howell. Boy, do we have plenty to talk about, Scott. And we're going to focus today on our two big teams here in South Louisiana because both of them are not hitting the panic button, but the hand is, if this is the button, the hand is getting close. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of stress going on in Tiger Town with LSU on one side of the ball, and then down in New Orleans on the other side of the ball, there's a lot of stress. Boy, if we could put the two together, we'd have quite a team. It's you know, I know you've had a ton of experiences in your days, and I think the one thing we're noticing, and I heard you mention this, boy, things can turn quickly, can't they? I mean, we're 4 weeks into the NFL season, we're 5 weeks into the college season. 1 or 2 weeks in, you can feel like, boy, we really got a good thing going, and it takes 2 weeks later, and you're like, oh my God, what's going on? Panic.
Yeah, I think that's what happens. You see early in the season, whether it's college football or NFL football, high school football, youth football, you think the first couple weeks, oh, we have some kinks, we'll iron them out. And then quickly, you're in game 4 and 5. And then when those kinks haven't gotten ironed out, now panic sets in. Fan base, coaches, players. And I think you've seen that at both LSU and you've seen it with the New Orleans Saints. There's things that haven't been corrected since week 1. The struggles that have still been there are still there. And I think that's why you see the panic and you hear it in the coaches' voices, press conferences. You can hear it in the players' voices too. So, yeah, it goes quickly from week 1 and 2. Yeah, we need to work on these things to weeks 4 and 5. We got a problem here.
Yeah. Let's start with LSU because to your point about week 1, we certainly know the Tigers had to learn a lot of things with the loss to Florida State, just like they did 1 year ago. But then as the schedule started to progress, you start thinking, okay, well, maybe they're starting to look a little better. Things are going to be okay. But let's keep in mind, let's put an asterisk there for a second, that you went up against a top 5 team in Florida State. Then you played Grambling out of the SWAC, and you should have mowed them down, and you did eventually after it was tied 7-7. You played a Mississippi State team that is completely changing the offense and taking their quarterback out of what he does best, which is throw the ball, and you manhandled them in Starkville. And look, you survived a very good test against an Arkansas team that really punched you in the mouth. And over the last several years, now 4 years in a row, that game has been decided by 3 points or less. So you have panic in week 1. Then you go weeks 2, 3, and 4, and you're feeling pretty good. Now you get to week 5. And the Tigers went to Ole Miss. And I know we didn't have a chance to talk on the postgame edition of Game Notes earlier in this week. But, Scott, they gave up more points in that game than they've ever done to any team in history. And a lot of people immediately thought, well, what about when KJ Costello came to Tiger Stadium in Mississippi State and they threw the ball all over the place? Yeah, he set a passing record for 601, but they only ran like 36 yards in that game. This game blew that stat away the way Ole Miss played, and now the panic's setting in again because they went up against another talented team with a talented head coach who knows how to be aggressive and exploit weaknesses. And Ole Miss did that to the point where they've got Tiger Town reeling as they get ready for the Missouri Tigers on Saturday.
Yeah, and to your point, a lot of the same problems that you saw against a really good Florida State team in week 1 are still there. And not only are they there, they seem like they're getting a little bit worse. At this point in the season, you should be tackling better. You should be covering better. You should kind of know who you are as a defense and what you do well. And I think, yeah, Ole Miss has a really good offense. Ole Miss has a really good head coach who calls plays, and he's always been a great offensive mind. That doesn't matter. You got into a shootout. It was a back-and-forth game. But at some point, you have to be accountable for your effort to the ball, your angle you take to the ball, gang tackling. I just see when I watch LSU play Ole Miss, there's just way too many one-on-one tackling. And that's what the game is. You get into space. No, you get into space at the college and the NFL level. You have to be able to tackle guys one-on-one. You're not always going to have somebody there with you.
So, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you were leading to that. And Brian Kelly has talked about this on more than one occasion, Scott. For people who don't understand, you know, I mean, you were a defensive guy. You think when you're on offense, what are you supposed to do? Block, catch the ball, run, score. When you're on defense, you're supposed to run, tackle. And for 2 or 3 weeks now, he keeps saying, we've got to get better at tackling. We've got to learn how to tackle better. That was your side of the ball. That's where you made a career. When a coach is saying we have to get better at tackling and people think, well, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do on defense. Yeah. What is he talking about? Is he talking about angles? Is he talking about wrapping up? Is he talking about where to put your head in the shoulder when you duck down to tackle? What is that they're looking to improve on when he keeps saying, yeah, we've got to get better at tackling, and people go, yeah, that's what you're supposed to do?
Well, I think there's a lot of things that go into being a great tackler as an individual, and a lot of things go into being a great tackling defense. First, I'll start with the individual. If you are not a very good athlete and you're trying to tackle a really good athlete in space, 9 times out of 10, you're just not going to be able to do it. So that can be some alarm bells. Like maybe we just don't have very good athletes. I don't think that's the case, but there's something to be said about it. If you can't tackle well in space one-on-one against other talented players, and you do it over and over and you keep on missing those tackles, you maybe just aren't a very good athlete at the position you're playing. Secondly, when it comes to that, you can hide guys' deficiencies. You can hide guys not being great tacklers. And the way you do that is having great tackling defenses, swarming to the ball, getting off your block immediately, taking good angles. Maybe it's you don't play very much man defense. Maybe now you play zone defense, so you have more eyes on the quarterback, and now you have 11 guys or 7 guys in coverage rallying to the ball. So there's a lot of things that go in to improving your tackling on defense. It's not, I don't want to just say, you're not a very good player, not a very good athlete, you're never going to be a good tackler, or you're never going to be a good tackling defense. The D coordinator can call certain defenses to allow you to be better tacklers, especially in space.
All right. They made a hire. I want to ask you about that in just a moment this week and what it could do to help the defense. But since you mentioned open field tackling and you mentioned wrapping up in one-on-one, Brian Kelly actually addressed that exact topic with kind of a staggering number with what happened last week against Ole Miss. Here's Brian Kelly early this week addressing what Scott just talked about, and that is the importance of tackling on defense.
We know the situation that we have. We've got to get the guys that are on our roster playing at a higher level. And we had 34 missed tackles for 284 yards. We have to tackle the football, and we have to create a new line of scrimmage. If we do those two things, we're going to be better on defense, we're going to keep the points down, and we're going to continue to win football games at LSU. That's the standard. We didn't live up to that standard, and we need to.
All right, Scott, so to your point, 34 missed tackles for almost 300 yards. That sounds staggering for most people who aren't used to the nitty-gritty and getting into details. That sounds like Ole Miss really took advantage of your inability to stop them at any point in the game.
Yeah, and I tell you, from that soundbite, and I kind of raised my eyes, the thing that really stands out to me about what Coach Kelly said is we have to get the guys on our roster to play better. That tells me they are not happy with the talent level at certain positions. And whether it's the portal, whether it's recruiting, they are telling you right now, we're going to continue to struggle with this a little bit because we don't feel like we have the guys who are going to become Ray Lewis overnight. It's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. So we're going to give up some points. Thank gosh you have an offense and a quarterback who can score some points. But I think Coach Kelly in that clip says, hey, we're not going to become the Dome Patrol overnight. Don't expect that. We're going to struggle some this year, but we got to coach up our guys to the best we can.
Yeah, and look, Scott, he said it. I had it Monday on the post-game edition where he said, look, the guys we have, this is who we are. Don't go looking at the door and expect a Scott Shanle or a Demario Davis to come rolling in here because it's not happening. Mm-hmm. He has had to say that a couple of times. What we have is what we have, and we know they're not living up to that standard. And it's interesting that you caught that from that clip because he has actually said those words on more than one occasion. Nobody else is coming in the door. This is our unit. This is what we have in the locker room, and we've got to get these guys better. But certainly they can tell that something is amiss because earlier this week, and I don't know if you've ever had any personal interactions with them, but they hired Pete Jenkins back, legendary defensive coach, has been around the game forever, has had more than one stint in Baton Rouge. Now, he doesn't really deal with the defensive backs. He's always been known more of the frontline attack on defense, but he is a defensive guru. And so the fact that they brought him in kind of also tells me, to your point, Scott, okay, we've got a problem and we can't bring anybody else in at this stage. So we need to get help elsewhere. Let's go get a guy who's known for defense. And so Pete Jenkins is back in town. How do you think a move like that helps the team?
Well, I love it. First of all, because it says a lot about your coaching staff. It says a lot about Coach Kelly. They just want minds. They want great football minds around the program. And if you have an idea of something we're not doing right, and it means you're open-minded. That's what all great coaches do. They're always willing to learn and have another voice in the room. So I love, maybe he comes back and he sees something at practice that can help them in some area of the game, whether it be tackling, run fits, pass defense. Maybe he just sees something that nobody else has thought of. So just like when Coach Orgeron was there and they won the national championship with Joe Burrow and they had Chase and all those guys, tremendous players. But if you look at the coaching staff that was assembled, they had tons of guys. I mean, John Robinson was back from USC. Bobby April, who was in the NFL, was their special teams coach, and he was an advisor. So the more advisors that you can have of guys who've been around and seen the game played at a high level, I think it can only help.
Well, and here's one of the reasons why they are bringing another mind in. And to your point about having minds, Brian Kelly also addressed that because Matt House, defensive coordinator, a lot of people, a lot of rumblings in South Louisiana and Baton Rouge and Tigertown saying this guy's got to go because they see the numbers that they're giving up. But he even said, look, when we go into the meeting, we always invite opinions. We always want to hear what you have to say, what I have to say, what he's got to say. And in the end, they'll try to come to a consensus. But he also said on defense, there's one voice that's leading the charge, and that's the defensive coordinator, even though they are open to opinions. Now they're going to get another one with Pete Jenkins. And Scott, here's why. Because take a look at where this defense is for LSU. These are national rankings now, and quite honestly, can't get much worse. They're 114th in the country on opponent points per game. Yards per game, they're 105th that they're giving up. Also 114th in opponent yards per play. That's a big number because it makes it easy on second and third downs. Look at that opposing third downs at 118. And Scott, opposing red zone scores for LSU, 120. What you don't see there, Scott, an LSU opponent's gotten in the red zone, they haven't missed. They're 100%, 95%, excuse me. They're 19 of 20. 19 of 20 in terms of red zone appearances for LSU opponents against that defense this year. That's not good.
No. I mean, we talk about it all the time when we talk about the NFL and the philosophy of making teams kick field goals. Certainly, that's not going to happen as much in college football. It's a much more wide open game. The skill set is different. But once you get in the red zone, I mean, you have to at some point make some field goals. But taking the ball away is primary objective. You get in the red zone and take a ball away, that's a huge turn of momentum of the game. But yeah, at some point you have to buckle down in the red zone. Maybe it's a philosophy thing. Maybe it's not running man down in the red zone. Maybe it's when the field gets compressed, playing more zone and making the team make the tight window throw. So there could be a philosophy thing, but I also think maybe get some feedback from the players. One thing I think as a coach, when you start getting feedback from the players, when we get to the red zone, what do you guys like? What do you think we play well? You put some responsibility on the players. And instead of the players saying, well, I did what coach told me to do, and it's just not working. You get feedback from the players and start doing some of the things they want to do. Now there's ownership in that.
Yeah, that would be a great question to try to ask Brian Kelly on the next opportunity of how much does he take feedback from the players instead of what the coaches are seeing from their point of view and what the guys are seeing on the field. Another point he's been really emphasizing, Scott, is the fact he keeps talking about, look, we're young. You know, I know there's always a lot of turnover, and there are a lot of LSU guys that have moved on and they're making their pay now on Sundays playing in the big league. And he keeps saying that we're young. Well, there was a local radio host this week in Baton Rouge that started pulling out a look at all of the players and said, well, Brian Kelly keeps saying they're young, but this guy's played 42 games. This guy's played 38. This guy's played 46. And on the one hand, I think that's a good perspective because they do have a lot of experience. But on the other hand, they are only 5 games into this system. So they're young to this system, not young to football. And where some of those players are coming from, they're not only trying to get used to a new system at LSU, they're trying to get used to the level of play in the SEC, because it's not like all these transfers came from other SEC schools or Pac-12 schools or maybe, Big 12 or Big East, where they're used to seeing this type of speed. So now they've got 2 things that they're trying to adjust to. And I think that's kind of what's showing its ugly head, isn't it? They're learning on the fly, and they're learning on the fly against talent that quite honestly might just be better than they are right now.
No, I think that's a great point. There is a lot that goes into, nobody really talks enough about the transfer portal and getting up, picking up, going to another school and learning all new. There's going to be different verbiage. There's going to be different ways people call cover 2, cover 3. You have to learn that. There's going to be different techniques those coaches coach. And then to your point, there's a lot of guys. It's not like a lot of guys walked into LSU out of the transfer portal from Alabama and Georgia and USC and programs like that. So there is probably a level of speed and preciseness that some of these guys haven't faced yet. So maybe you judge more of who they are in October instead of September. But yeah, you got to get up to speed quick because a lot can change. But that's the nature we're in. College football now with the transfer portal, if you're willing to pick up and move a few times, you're going to have to pick up and move and learn a few different language when it comes to defensive football and offensive football.
I want your opinion here. Do you think? Because I don't think you can. Maybe you're different. I'd love to hear your thought. Can you build a program through the transfer portal? I see the transfer portal as a chance to, when you need a wide receiver or you need a left tackle or somebody where you can kind of pick and choose and fill in for an immediate stopgap, but then you can still go, younger. Like in basketball, hey, look, I need a point guard. There's a point guard at that school that's got 4 years experience, but he's got another year left. That's my stopgap to bring him in with experience while I go try to recruit, somebody else to then bring into the system. Brian Kelly's done a good job trying to get the high school talent. They're losing some Louisiana talent, which has been a big point of emphasis for people down here. But when you talk about the NIL and the transfer portal, do you think you can build a program through that, or should it be more of a fill in as needed, but we still need to get the grassroots of our program built by bringing young kids in and developing them?
It's the latter, in my opinion. I think that the transfer portal, you can plug holes, you can upgrade immediately at some positions. You can win a lot of games with the transfer portal. I don't believe you can win championships. I don't believe you can become a dynasty through the transfer portal. I just don't think you have enough time. You get a high school kid, you have time to take them from 18 years old to 21 or whatever they are. You have a chance to show them and tell them exactly what you expect your program, the way you build your culture. When you're grabbing guys out of the portal who've been at one or two other schools, they don't really care. They really don't. To me, the NFL, you end up being longer on an NFL team sometimes. If you sign a 4-year contract, you have a chance to learn a program's culture more in the NFL than college football. I mean, kids get up and move after 1 year. You don't have time to absorb what the expectations are in each single program that you've been in. So I think you can find a way to win a lot of games. Deion Sanders is proof of that. I just don't think you can win championships by doing it. You just don't have enough time with guys.
Yeah, I don't want to get too sidetracked from LSU because we're going to get back and talk about their offense in just a moment and show you some numbers. But because we're talking about transfer portal and a mention of NIL, I got to ask you this. Did you see what Utah just did?
Yeah.
What the Utah just did? 85 trucks out on a football field where each player gets a truck. Scott, this is you're not wrangling these cats back into the bag. This is the wild, wild west right now.
Yeah. To me, college football and the NCAA went from you got suspended for taking a ham sandwich from somebody because you didn't pay for it to now kids are getting Dodge Ram pickups. And I just don't know how we don't have adults in a room to say, here's the middle ground, guys. Here's the middle ground to what we need to do with these young guys, these young athletes, student athletes. It is, I'm afraid with the way the conferences are going, the realignment, you're going to basically see a farm league for the NFL. You're going to see a system where it's already semi-pro football, but at some point they are supposed to be getting college degrees too and staying eligible and doing those things. There's a lot of kids out there who are still paying off college loans because they weren't good enough to play football. So student comes first, athlete comes second. I do like the perks. I do like the name, image, likeness. If you're playing great on the football field, basketball court, you should be able to sign some autographs and make some money. That's your name. That's your image. That's your likeness. But this whole other rounding up millions of dollars and handing out checks to get recruits, I don't know if that's good nature.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that's why Caleb Williams at USC said, I think I might come back for another year. Not because he came out and then said, because I can make more money in college than football and I might get drafted by a really bad team. I'm sure he wants to go back to class. That's the whole reason. Because look, I'm not going to compare the two programs, but let's say you're a recruit. And let's say you're looking at LSU and anybody else around this area, and you say, okay, man, they got the packed stadiums, and I like the light show, and I like all their stuff they're doing on social media. I'm going to go out west and see, here's a team that's been to the Rose Bowl several times and has won what was the Pac-12, and they just gave every guy on the roster a brand new truck. I mean, now it's really going to become who's the highest bidder, who has the deepest pockets in their alumni association, or who has the biggest business who can do a tax write-off. I mean, Scott, you're 17, 18-year-old kid, and you see that. You don't think for a second you're going to go, hey, Mom, hey, Dad, can we go take a trip to see the Utes out in Utah? I don't know why all of a sudden I like that program.
Exactly. Where is Utah again? I don't know. All I know is they're handing out pickup trucks. So it used to be, I heard college coaches say that kids and parents are asking for money just to visit their programs. Like they want $5,000 just to show up and go on an unofficial visit, which is absolutely crazy to me. I think, and I kind of laugh, like Nebraska's building $500 million worth stadium renovations and upgrades and all these. I'm like, that time is past. These kids, everybody has good facilities. They don't care what your facilities look like anymore. They want to know how much money can you give them on NIL. That's where they're going to go.
Yep. No, there's no doubt. No doubt. It's a wild scene. All right. I had to ask about that because it just happened and you were mentioning NIL and you're mentioning transfer portal, and that certainly caught my attention this week. So, the battle's on now. Who's going to be next? Who all's getting, Corvettes? Who's getting whatever, sports cars and all that kind of stuff. All right, let's get back to LSU for a minute. And so we focus on the defense, Scott, but I want to go to the offensive side of the ball because what's getting lost in LSU giving up 706 yards to the Rebels and losing in a game that had over 100 points in the ball game is what this offense has been doing for the last several weeks. Here's Brian Kelly this week talking about comparing the importance of what he has to do to get the defense straight. Why? Because of what his team is doing on offense. Here's the Tiger head coach.
The 2019 team, prolific. It won the national championship. These numbers are starting to look like those kind of numbers. That's the kind of offense that we're talking about. And that's why it's so darn important to play better defense. That's why it's so important, because when you have an offense like this, you want to be able to showcase. Absolutely. And it doesn't get the showcase because all the questions here are about the defense. And I understand that. Totally understand that. So that's why it's so important that we do the things necessary to get the points down so we play better defense.
Can't disagree, Scott. I mean,
No.
what's getting lost is the way Jane Daniels has been playing. You and I talked about a couple of weeks ago. You had Jefferson and you had Chase. Now you've got Neighbors and you've got Thomas Jr. I mean, those two are doing the same things those other two did back in 2019. I think Brian Kelly's right on point. We've got to fix 50% of the team on the field because the other 50% is lighting it up and it's getting lost in the commotion.
Yeah, there's no question. And you heard the urgency in his voice talking about this is why it's imperative we get the defense fixed, because would we still talk about Joe Burrow and Chase and Jefferson, all those guys, the same way if they didn't win a national championship? If they put up all those numbers but the defense was awful? The defense had Patrick Queen. They had great players on the defense who did their part as well. So that's why you hear the urgency in his voice. And I think Jay Daniels has to be given a ton of credit. He is to me, he's a way improved football player. And you saw it with Joe Burrow from the first year he was in LSU to the second year, he just worlds of difference from one year to the next. I think Jay Daniels is the same player. Last year, he would take off and run. It was a one receiver read. The guy wasn't open. Jay would take off and run. He's going through progressions. He's getting his guys open. And you've even really seen Mason Taylor get involved in this offense. They have a three-headed monster, and the third head of that three-headed monster really hasn't emerged yet. So I think once teams start trying to take away those receivers, you're going to see the middle of the field open up a little bit more. But yeah, this offense has been dynamic.
I think your comparison to Burrow is so well made because, as you know, I was critical of Daniels. It's 1001, got to go. And he wouldn't wait. He wouldn't sit in the pocket. He's worked on that. He's letting his receivers make a play, knowing that if everything breaks down, he still has a great chance to use his legs and get 10, 15, 20-plus yards. He doesn't have to do it all the time now. He can do it as needed, and he's very dynamic. So since Brian Kelly made the comparison, and you and I covered that 19 team from start to finish, I'm very hesitant making comparisons to that team because of what they did. But since Brian Kelly brought it up, I got some numbers for you, Scott, that I want you to look at because this, once again, goes to his point. The 2019 team is on the left. Right off the bat, through 5 games of the season, which is where we are right now, the 19 team was averaging almost 55 points a game. LSU right now, 43 points a game. But look at the first downs. Not all that different. Third down conversion, this year's team is better. Twice as many fourth down conversions. Now, the total yards, this is where it starts to skew a little bit because already through 5 games, Joe Burrow was over 2,000 yards passing through 5 games of the 2019 season. But look at the red zone scores. The LSU team back then was perfect, but this year, 24 of 27. It gets down to the bottom. The bottom line, Scott, points allowed. You just mentioned it. The 19 team, the defense was outstanding and the offense was off the charts. This year's offense is great, but this year's defense is allowing 31 points a game.
Yeah, and that's where the difference is. Like you said, I don't think anybody is going to take Jaden Daniels over Joe Burrow. No, probably people aren't going to take the receivers over Chase and Jefferson. Those two guys are top 5 receivers in the NFL. So there's no doubt the 2019 team was more talented. But those numbers, the fact that you're even sniffing some of those numbers and you're close to those numbers, right. I think, and like you said, anybody who followed the 2019 LSU team knows what that offense looked like. And Coach Kelly's telling you, I know you guys think it's bad, but look how close we are. Look how close we are to that all-time great offense. We're just missing this other part of the team that needs to carry the water for us a little bit.
Yeah. That team, the rushing yards of this year's team has gotten higher, and Logan Diggs has certainly started to come into his own from the running back situation, much more than what was 19. But what Burrow did from his position, as we've talked about ad nauseum, that's why it's so dangerous to compare those two, because the numbers were just basically untouchable. But to your point, the fact that Kelly's even bringing it up, he's kind of telling everybody, don't get lost with all the commotion on the defensive side of the ball. Don't forget, we've got an offense that's absolutely lighting it up right now.
Yeah.
Final thing on LSU, Scott, though, they go this weekend. It's on another 11 a.m. kick. They had no problem in Starkville against Mississippi State at 11 o'clock. But again, they flipped that program over, and they've taken a quarterback out of his comfort zone. Missouri, on the other hand, is doing very well. They've now cracked the top 25. And remember, it was 2 weeks ago, they welcomed a ranked Kansas State team and kicked an SEC record 61-yard field goal to get that win at home against Kansas State. But it's a confident team. It's an early morning team. And once again, it's a team that can stretch the field, which starts to raise red flags going up against this LSU defense.
Sure does. They have two good receivers on the outside, too. That's where you start with this Missouri team. The quarterback's a really good player. I think it's a dangerous game because nobody wakes up. I'm telling you, nobody really gets excited about going to Columbia, Missouri, especially when you play in the SEC. I played in Columbia, Missouri when we were in the Big 12, and it's just kind of one of those sleepy stadiums, and they'll get into it if they do well. But when you're an SEC kid and you go and you play at Bama and Tennessee and the Swamp and you play at all these places, Columbia, Missouri is not that. It has a potential that if you don't show up and play some of your best football right away, you're going to be in for a 4-quarter game. And that's where, like you said, K-State got into that game. And it was a long field goal. They lost to a close rival to them. So LSU has to be ready. I think a fast start by LSU is imperative this week.
Absolutely. It's a must for them on the road to try to get some of that confidence back. And we'll see what happens when it's the Tigers up in Missouri Saturday morning at 11 o'clock. Tell you what, let's take a quick timeout and a pause. When we come back, we're going to shift gears. We'll turn our focus to the Sunday game up in New England. The Saints licking their wounds after a second straight loss and a tough one at home to Tampa Bay. Can they right the ship against the New England Patriots? Scott and I will talk about that when we come back with more Game Notes. All right, we're back with more Game Notes, and now we're going to turn our attention to the NFL and the black and gold. Scott, like you talked about at the top here, everything felt great for 2 weeks, and we were talking about, and you were making an emphasis, and I was agreeing with you, that the Saints were kind of under the radar because of the talent. Unfortunately, the talent isn't producing. Since the second quarter of that Green Bay game, when the Saints went up 17-0, they have yet to visit the end zone. They gave up 18 straight in the fourth quarter to Green Bay to lose, and then they came home against Tampa Bay, and the home field advantage did nothing. 3 field goals and a 26-9 loss to Baker Mayfield and the Bucs to fall to 2-2 and 1-1 in the South. What's going on here now that we've hit the quarter pole for the Saints?
Yeah, life changes really quick in the NFL. You go from 2-0 to 2 weeks later being 2-2, and now everybody's questioning. They want coaching changes on the offensive side of the ball. They want to know what's going on with certain players. So things happen really quick. You start the season, you beat a really good Tennessee team, and everybody's thinking, here we go. NFC South champions. This is the team that we all read about in the offseason. And then a second half, fourth quarter spiral against Green Bay really changed everything. Because I don't think last week against Tampa Bay, you saw the same energy out of this team that you saw the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season. It was almost what's going on? Here we go again, kind of like last year. Last year was tough for the offense to get going. The defense held their weight. But all 3 phases of this team just are not clicking right now. And I think that's why you see some of the concern by the players and just the lack of energy level they have playing right now.
Yeah, and as much as we talked about the first 20 minutes talking about LSU and the questions on defense and how LSU's offense has been shining, for the most part, through at least 2 games and 3 quarters, the Saints defense has done well, but they spiraled out of control with a couple of key pass interference calls in the fourth quarter that hurt against Green Bay, and then never were able to get anything done against Tampa Bay. And so, yeah, you're right. Now there's a lot of people questioning. Everybody wants changes made on the offense. They want people fired because of it. Dennis Allen earlier this week said, look, he hears the noise. They've got the same kind of concerns that the fans have, but here's one of the things. Well, we'll hear from him a lot right now, but here's one of the things Dennis Allen had to say about their struggles.
Yeah, it's not good enough, so we've got to find ways to score points. I think everybody knows that. And now we've identified the problem. Now we got to identify the cure and how we solve that. And I think there's a lot of elements that kind of go into it. And I think schematically what we're doing, I think we got to pay attention to. I think execution we got to pay attention to. What are we teaching our guys? And are they getting those things done? So there's a lot of things that we're looking at.
Scott, immediately after that comment, a reporter followed up and said, okay, so you said you identified the problem. What are the problems? But he said it there towards the end. One could be scheme. Part 2 is execution. Those are the 2 things that he said. And he went on to say how they're related to one another, and you put them in the right position, then they can execute, blah, blah, blah. But that's what he's saying is some of the problems. I want to ask you what you hear in his voice, because he's saying one thing, but I have a feeling there's a tone that's a little different. What did you hear when you heard Dennis Allen say that?
Well, I think he's concerned because he knows he has a really good team. When it comes to, you look at 53 guys' name on paper, it's as talented of a roster as there is in the NFL. And they're not playing that way right now. So I think that's his concern. And I think some of his concern goes back to year 1 of him being the head coach, and the same problems existed. Offensively, they couldn't do anything. And I think Derek Carr was supposed to fix a lot of those problems. But now you have Derek Carr who's injured. How long is he going to remain injured? How long? Because it affected Derek last week. You can say what you want. I know a lot of people are down on Derek, like the signing, questioning the whole offseason acquisition of him. Listen, he's trying to play quarterback with a sprained AC joint. You saw him underthrow some balls last week. He is not healthy. He tried to play. It affected him. So I think the slack has to be picked up by the offensive line, the running game. A lot of different pieces can pick up the slack for an injured quarterback. But the one thing I like that Coach Allen did is he gave blame to both the coaches and the players. When he talked about scheme and execution, scheme is on the coaches to put in a good game plan. But it doesn't matter what you do scheme-wise. If you don't execute it as a player, it's not going to matter. So there's a lot of things I think the Saints offense can do to fix the problem they have. It remains to be seen if they can get out of that funk.
Well, I'm glad you said that you like that, because now you're going to get me going out of order with my clips. But here's another one now. This is Allen talking about, to your point, here's Dennis Allen when he was asked about it and about what certain areas or was it certain players. He's like, no. We're all in on this. Here's DA.
I mean, there was a couple of calls in the game defensively that I hated, and I told them on a couple of occasions I put them in a bad spot. That happens from time to time. And there's going to be times where I'm going to make a crappy call and I need the guys to bail me out. And there's going to be some times where, I'm going to put them in a great position to have a lot of success. Look, this is a team game. We're all in this, coaches and players alike. And we all have our hand in it, and we all have to be grown men and accept our accountability for where we're not functioning well, and look for ways to improve it.
So there you go, Scott. To your point, he included everybody in that, saying we got to get better on the sideline. We got to get better practice. We certainly got to get better executing on the field. I want you to hear another clip here, Scott, before we talk again. This is him talking about his overall frustrations. And again, to me, it's not so much what he's saying, because I think you're going to hear him here in a second. He's going to say the word panic, and he's going to say they're not panicking, but in the tone of his voice, I'm starting to wonder what else is behind that, and see if you pick up on it as well. Here's DA again.
It's frustrating because I think we can be better than we are, and yet, look, we're sitting here 4 games into the season at 2-2, 1 game back in our division, and so we're not going to sit here and act like the sky's falling and the season's over. Do we have to get better? Frickin' A right, we do. All right, and we need to do it quickly.
All right, so Scott, it's like you're listening to him talk, and then you're just waiting for where's the but? There's a but coming in here somewhere, right? And you talk, but ... Yeah, frickin' A right, we got to get better. So what are your thoughts on what you hear from DA?
Well, I think you hear a sense of urgency in his voice. You hear him. Listen, they all know in the organization that they can play better. They all feel like they dropped a game at Green Bay. They should be sitting here 3-1 at worst. And nobody thought the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were going to be any good with Tom Brady leaving. Tampa Bay still has really good defensive players. Baker Mayfield's kind of been a game manager, but Baker's playing some better football. So everybody looked at the schedule and thought, hey, we're going to be 4-0. We're going to be 4-0. And then we're going to go play the championships of the Bill Belichick Patriots. The Patriots are not very good. This is a game going on the road. You have to execute. You have to play good defense, and you need the offense to come to life. And I think one of the things that you can do offensively that you haven't seen, we've talked a lot on our shows about the offensive line not playing well. When the O-line plays well and you can turn and hand the ball off, and then you can play action. This Saints team, they have no play action pass. There's no play action pass because we can't run the ball. So there's a lot of issues that need to get fixed on the Saints offense side of the ball. And the other thing is everybody wants Pete Carmichael, take a seat, let someone else do it. Pete Carmichael's been there since 2006. He coached Drew Brees in San Diego. Pete Carmichael ran the offense in 2012 when Sean Payton was gone. Pete Carmichael knows how to call offense. I'm telling you right now, the problem with Pete is he's almost too good of a guy. He wants everybody to get the ball. And if I'm Dennis Allen, I'm going to Pete and saying, listen, I don't care if we have people mad after this game because they didn't touch the ball. You call plays to beat whatever New England's doing to us. And if Michael Thomas has 25 catches because they're not covering him, then do it. So I think Pete needs to get back to calling plays based on the defense he's facing. And don't worry about everybody eating and getting the ball and everybody having a good time after the game because they look at the box score. I think that's kind of some of the problems that are going on right now.
Were you surprised that, and I know one of the magic numbers you've always emphasized for Alvin is 20. He had 24 touches last week in his first game back after serving that 3-game suspension. What was troubling for me, and we're going to see a number that correlates to some of his passing here in just a moment, but Scott, I think of 13 receptions One of those receptions was for 10 yards. So he had 12 other catches for 23 yards. He wasn't even getting 2 yards a carry other than the one that went for 10 yards. And then he had his 11 rushes as well. Were you surprised that they got Kamara the ball 24 times? And then even if you weren't, were you surprised at the lack of overall production from the numbers?
I wasn't surprised they got him the ball so many times. They were excited about getting him back. He's been an electrifying playmaker in the offense, and they're thinking, this is the guy who's going to get us out of this rut. It didn't happen, but when I looked at the box score after the game and I saw 13 catches for 33 yards, I thought it was a typo. I've never seen anything like that. I'm like, there's no way Alvin caught the ball 13 times, first of all. No. Secondly, there's no way he caught the ball 13 times and only had 33 yards. So something was surely amiss in lots of areas. You didn't see what you've seen Alvin do in the past is make the first guy miss, and you didn't see that a whole lot against Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay has a really good defense, and they played this Saints offense well the past couple of years.
You mentioned so many people calling for Carmichael's head. We talked about it with LSU, people wanting Matt House because of the defense not producing. Now the Saints offense isn't producing, and people are screaming about why are they screaming. We'll take a look at the numbers here, because with the lowest scoring teams through the first 4 weeks in the NFL, the Giants are the worst at 11.5 points a game. What might shock some people is Joe Burrow and Cincinnati are the second worst scoring offense at just over 12. And then the next two teams you see on the list are the New England Patriots and the Saints. And Scott, that screams take the under if you're into those type of things this weekend, because combined, they're not even scoring 30 points as a team. We know the Jets in their situation, there's Las Vegas and then Atlanta. So a big stack of teams there at 15.5 points a game, including the Saints. But that's why so many people have been screaming for change. Now, Dennis Allen says, look, I hear you, but we're not going to make the change.
We won't make any coaching changes. I don't think I've never seen that to be the right answer, particularly when you're 4 games into the season. And yet we have to be better. And I understand everybody's frustration, and believe me, everybody in this building's frustrated with it, because we have to find ways to put more points on the board.
Scott, as fans are short and fanatics, so you're going to hear from them, and as soon as the game is over, hell, even in the stadium, they're already screaming, fire somebody when you're losing. But this takes me back to what you and I went through last year covering this team, and you said it earlier. You're 2-2. You're 15 minutes away from being 3-1 before you absolutely imploded against Green Bay at their place. You would have stolen another one on the road. So even if you want to give the Saints the loss at home because they didn't look good at all against Tampa Bay, we should be talking about a team that's 3-1 instead of 2-2. And now we start getting into that feel of what we had last year, that I have a feeling if it keeps going the way it's trending, we're going to get to weeks 10, 11, 12, 13, and teams are going to be fighting for those positions. And you and I are going to be sitting there again on TV going, well, what might have been? If you don't blow 15 minutes in Green Bay, that one win versus one loss could mean you're here instead of here. And now you're begging to get into the playoffs instead of controlling your own destiny. And I think that's where a lot of that urgency is coming from, is we've read this book before. We already know how it ends. We don't want to get to the middle. Let's change books, right? Let's change direction, because we know how this is going to turn out.
You don't want to win one, lose one, win one, lose one. It's not going to turn out well for you. A lot of times in the NFL, if you can just stack wins and you find a way to stack wins, and stacking wins would be 3-1. You get out of each quarter of the season at 3-1. The old 16-game season, that's 12-4, 12-5. Yeah, I mean, you're sitting really pretty if you can stack wins in each quarter of the season and be 3-1. You gave a game away. There's no doubt about it. You gave a game away at Green Bay. Now, you can't do anything about it, but you're going to have to go steal a game that when you look at the schedule, that everybody said, wow, this game, maybe the Thursday night game against Jacksonville, people had that as a toss-up. You got to go out and get that game. There's got to be games that you reclaim that maybe people thought were toss-up games before. But I agree from this perspective. You are a bad quarter of football away from being 3-1, and the narrative completely changes. No one's asking you to rearrange your coaching staff. Right. 2-2 feels a lot different. So really, that's really what it comes down to, is a bad quarter against Green Bay. Pete Carmichael wouldn't be on the hot seat. I do agree with Dennis that this is not week 8 or 9 where we are hitting the panic button and we are at last resort desperate measures. Let's see where we are after 2 or 3 more weeks. If you come out of this thing and you're 5-2 and the offense starts clicking and Derek's healthy and the running game reemerges, people will forget that we went through this semi-drama this early in the season.
It's really just a difference, isn't it, in the definition of panic versus urgency? because the urgency is certainly there. If you're not going to panic, you better realize we're in an urgent situation 5 weeks into the season.
There's no question. And we talked about this, and I think this is going on throughout the entire NFL. You see points are down. A 300-yard passing game is hard to come by anymore. It's like you check out box scores of games, and you're like, where did all the 300-yard passing games go? What's going on around the NFL is offense coordinators are scared to death of losing their jobs because they turn the football over. We talk about it. Everybody talks about it on every single show, the takeaway turnover ratio and how that equates to wins and losses in the NFL. So offensive coordinators right now are telling their quarterbacks, hey, just be very calculated. Don't turn the ball over. We're going to call plays. We're going to be conservative. I think the Saints have to go back, dust off some 2009, 2010, 2012, whatever playbooks you need to find to say, we're going to go after it. If we throw 2 interceptions, we play with a really good defense. But we're taking we're going to take the can opener, we're going to open the top of this can, and we're going to let things fly. And until you get that type of mindset, it's going to be hard to really get out of the rut you're in.
Well, a lot of people then will hear you say that, and then they'll turn to the quarterback and say, well, I hope this is the guy that can get that done, because there were certainly a lot of expectations with his experience to come in and really get this offense back on track. Andy Dalton was a stopgap trying to fill in. They couldn't figure out what they wanted to do with Jameis and with Dalton. And, of course, as soon as Dalton goes south, they want Jameis back in, but they quickly wanted Jameis out. So we know that hot mess we went through. So Derek Carr comes to town, Scott, and everybody's thinking, all right, here comes an experienced guy. Now we're going to give him the defense he never had in Vegas, and we're going to give him a wealth of talent on the offensive side. And let's see it, like you said, rip the top off and let that baby rip, and let's see what we do. But here we are 2-2, and then some of the numbers with the passing game a little troubling. And I don't know if it's schematics, I don't know if it's the play calling, or to your point of just get it to the guys and forget about who's reading the box score. But Dennis Allen somewhat addressed this topic and about what he might want to see. And then I want to show you some numbers on the backside we'll talk about. Here's DA talking about Carr and the Saints passing game.
Yeah, I'd say it's been disappointing that we hadn't been able to score points like we need to. And so how do we get those guys with speed on the field, and how do we get the ball in their hands, and can we create some run after catch opportunities as well as some downfield throws? I think there's been a couple of games where we've been able to get some downfield throws, and yet I think we got to, try to work to, maybe get the ball underneath to them a little bit more on some catch and run opportunities.
All right, Scott, right there. Last 4 seconds to me is the key of everything he said right there. Yeah, it's frustrating you're not scoring. They got to do better. Everybody talks about the speed. Look, I've done it with you. Rashid Shaheed, let him rip, baby. Just throw it as hard as you can. Let him go chase it. To me, it was those last 4 seconds that he just said about there. You can almost hear the frustration. We're not getting the job done. Quit looking for the 60-yarder. How about a 6-yarder that could turn into a 26-yarder, right?
Yeah.
Get it to him underneath a little bit. Did you pick up on that, or am I just mishearing that?
No, I think if you watch the Saints offense enough, you've seen the running game has not been existent. There's been some deep shot plays, and guys like me who sit here and say, open up the offense, everybody thinks that means throwing the ball deep 45 times a game. That's not what I mean. Opening up the offense means when you think about the seam routes down the middle by the tight end, you think about slants by Michael Thomas, you think about all those things that the Saints have done consistently well. When Drew Brees was losing his arm strength, when he was getting into the latter part of his career, he was still surgical underneath. And a lot of it is just timing, getting that timing out. You need pass protection to do those things. You need pass protection to run those deep 15 and 15-yard ins and outs and things like that. You need time to do those things when you're going intermediate passing game. But I certainly think I agree with Dennis. It doesn't have to be a screen in the short game. The short game can be a slant. The short game can be a 5-yard out by the tight end. Just simple, easy throws that even if the pass protection is not great, they're easy, high percentage completions.
And certainly coming off of that shoulder injury, at least for Carr, personally, that might even help him so he's not trying to strain it with that arm, because we saw him short hopping, one hop balls in that game against Tampa Bay. And yes, he did let one uncork one late in the ball game, and Tampa Bay had great defense on that pass into the end zone, but maybe that helps him out. So Scott, look at these numbers. This is from NFL Next Gen Stats, but I want you to take a look at the passing ranges from Derek Carr and the Saints offense. Because of passes of 20 or more yards, we're only hitting 33%, 6 out of 18. Passes of 10 to 20 yards, 8 of 19. So the percentage gets a little worse. But then look at the 0 to 10, the number there, and the number of passes. Are you surprised that we've had 27 passes at or behind the line of scrimmage? That number seems high to me.
Yeah, especially in 4 games. I mean, you're looking at that's a lot of probably screen passes, quick jailbreak screens to the wide receiver. But that's where you heard Dennis talking about, run after catch. Guys have to make people miss. If you're getting a screen pass or you're getting a short pass behind the line of scrimmage, that's saying we're getting the ball into your hands because you're a playmaker. Make somebody miss. Go get some yards. A lot of things go into, you make a guy miss, but you also need guys blocking downfield. You need the offensive lineman blocking to keep those D linemen from peeling off and making those plays behind the line of scrimmage. But I think part of the reason you see so many of those plays is because we have playmakers who you get the ball in their hands, they can make somebody miss. But the struggles with the offensive line early in the season, the injuries, they haven't. You go back to that Tennessee game, and Derek got hit a ton. And I think it scared the organization, saying, we paid this guy a lot of money. He's getting killed. We can't let that happen. So I think that's why you've seen the ramp up in short passes.
So you go to New England, and we know that Bill Belichick does not have Tom Brady. That offense has not looked at him over the last several years. They've got a young guy in there that certainly had success on the college level, but Mac Jones doesn't seem the kind of guy that's going to scare anybody when you're going up against him. So for a quick start for the Saints, do you think it's more important on the defensive side to make a statement at their stadium, or does it need to be this offense now that you'll have week 2 with Kamara, Carr still back in there playing, another week now dealing with that shoulder injury? Is it more important for the offense to make some drives and hit on some plays for the Saints to get what you mentioned, which is a quick start?
Definitely offense. I don't think there's any question. I think it'll alleviate a lot of stress that the coaches have, the players have in the locker room. It'll alleviate the stress of the fans. We want to see a fast start by the offense because I think it puts a ton of pressure on the New England Patriots. Their offense will look abysmal against the Dallas Cowboys. So Bill Belichick is sitting here praying that it's a 6-3 game. That's what he wants. Bill Belichick does not want to see the Saints offense show up and score 2 touchdowns out the gate. Now Mac Jones has to go out there because New England doesn't have a whole lot of playmakers. Their running game's not the best. They lost Judon on defense, who's one of the better pass rushers in the NFL. They lost Gonzalez, their starting cornerback, who's one of the better young players in the NFL. They have holes on defense. So I think it's imperative that the Saints offense comes out with a really fast start and says to New England, hey, I hope you brought your track shoes because your offense is going to have to score some points today.
Yeah, I think weather's going to be a key too, Scott. Not to turn all Jim Cantoria on you here, but here in the southern part of the United States, we're still dealing with record heat, waiting for that cold front to come through. And there's supposed to be one coming down this direction, for this weekend. But if you look at that system over the east, you've got one system coming up the Atlantic, and then that front coming through. They're talking about a drop in temperatures and a lot of rain. And don't forget, New England's one of those rare outdoor stadium games the Saints don't have, but 4 this year? That's one of them. So I certainly hope if the weather comes, I hope it gets out so you're not dealing with cold weather and rainy weather on top of trying to get into a track meet and have anything come down. I just want any kind of break. The Saints just need a break, right?
Yeah.
You got to turn it around. And if it means good weather for 3 hours, so be it. We'll take whatever break we can get to see if they can get on it, because then it's a quick turnaround, like you mentioned, for a game against Jacksonville. And I think if you go back, remember 4 of the first 6 are on the road. Scott, I think we said at worst you want to be 3-3. Well, maybe this isn't the route to get there, but you still have a chance to at least be 3. You still got a chance to be 4-2 if you can win both of these. But you didn't want to be 2-2, and God knows you don't want to be 2-4 after a short week. You can't afford
if you're at 2-4, your chances of making the playoffs are really slim to none. And it's just the way the percentages say when you look at the history, the course of history over a lot of time in the NFL. 2-4, that's tough sledding because now you're playing 2 more weeks just to get back to where you are right now at 500. And no one's happy with where you are right now. No, you're not going to be happy at 500. You're playing 2 more games just to get back to trying to be happy. So to me, this is a must-win. I think a lot of people will tell you that. New England is not a very good football team. Anybody who watched them play the Dallas Cowboys last week, Dallas is one of the better teams in the NFC. But anybody who watched them last week, the Saints should win this game. It comes down to scoring more points on offense. And you know what? To your point about the weather, it doesn't have to turn into a 40-attempt game by Derek Carr. Maybe the weather comes in and it forces this offensive line to run block for a good back in Kamara. To me, if you had to run the ball 40 times versus New England running the ball 40 times, I would say the Saints have a better O-line and a better running back to get that done.
Yeah, well, you'd like to. I mean, there's been questions on the O-line and what they've been doing, but I agree with you. I'd love to see him do that. Let him make his moves, just open up a couple holes, grind it out. Instead of making it 6-3, make it 17-3. That's all you got to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Shouldn't threaten you. That's all you need to do. So we'll see with that afternoon kick on Sunday. All right, Scott, before we get out of here, I got to ask you, because it's not a secret. We told everybody, they know that you live in the greater Dallas area. Are the Longhorns back, baby? Here comes the Red River Rivalry. Here comes that burnt orange to town. Are the Longhorns back? Or is Oklahoma going to show them that last year was a fluke and they're going to come in and get them? That's a big game this weekend right in your backyard.
Listen, Texas is getting closer to being back. They're cleaning up in recruiting. They're undefeated. I think A lot of people laughed when Oklahoma and Texas said they were going to the SEC and they were going to get drugged. I think you've seen a ramp up in recruiting for both those schools. Kids want to play in the SEC, but I'm biased on this pick, Mike. I'm biased on this pick, Vic, because my son goes to Norman. He's a Sooner. I've heard Boomer Sooner. He's coming back. Him and a group of buddies are going down to the Cotton Bowl. So I hope Oklahoma waxes these guys. I'm a Brett Venables fan. I think Brett's a really good defensive mind. He's a good head coach. I know some of those guys there, so I'm Boomer Sooner all the way. Horns down for sure.
Hey, look, I did not get all personal stories. I used to go to basketball camp with Billy Tubbs at OU, and I'm a big fan of them from my days going back there. I hope your son has the chance, if they still do it, because I lived 10 years in Dallas and grew up my high school days there. I hope they still go down the street where they split the street, and it's all OU fans on one side and all Texas fans on the other side, and they're either stopping in the bars or stopping in the restaurants, and then when they walk the street, they just scream at each other. I hope he gets the chance to enjoy that, because it is a lot of fun, and it's a very festive weekend and what is a very big game, for both of these teams. But I'm glad to hear your son's getting to go, and I hope he gets to take it all in. Will Dad go with them for a little while? It is fun.
No, he's got his friends. I think I'm going to watch it on TV. I'll get the front row seat, but it looks. The one thing I will say this: you've seen so many of these things get changed in college football, the tradition. So you talk about those things. I'm so excited that he's going to experience those things, especially as going to Norman. They'll get to go back. Hopefully, they go back to school with a big win. But everybody always wants to change college football and the traditions. They wanted to move this game to Jerry's World. I'm like, no, keep it at that old stadium at the Cotton Bowl, down by the State Fair. I hope they keep it down there forever and they don't change those traditions, because it is a cool game and one of the biggest rivalries in college football.
Oh, and what they split? I think they split it right at the 50.
They do.
Side it's all OU red. One side's all Texas burnt orange, and circles all the way around. No, it's such a great tradition. I remember when I was there. I really hope he has fun. Now, look, next time we get together for this, I want to remember that we talked about this, no matter what the score is, and we'll talk about those teams since they are coming to the SEC, but we need some firsthand experience on what it was like for him for his first time down there, okay?
Yep, absolutely. Hopefully a big win.
Absolutely. Hope so. Boomer all the way. I hope it goes well. Hey, Scott, thanks as always. Lots to talk about. I knew we did a lot of tough topics, but hopefully we'll see some teams turn it around. Once again, LSU and Missouri Saturday morning, and then the Saints up in New England to take the Patriots. Scott and I will see you on television Sunday to get you ready for Saints game day, and then we'll come back here and I'll talk about it again next week. Scott, appreciate the time. I'll see you this weekend, bud.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds good.
All right. With Scott Shanle, I'm Victor Howell. Enjoy your football weekend. We'll see you next time for more sports talk here on Game Notes.